Here we are for our next virtual field trip at the Haw Ridge Park in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. This land was originally part of the larger Oak Ridge Reservation, which was set aside in the 1940s for the development of the atomic bomb in a famous story. And some parts of it has been turned over to the public as recreational areas. So we're standing on the Melton Hill Greenway, which now runs for several miles of paved bicycle and walking path. And we are at a power line cut. And for botanists, a power line cut is a marvelous kind of opportunity for plants to grow if it's maintained properly. In our vegetation in East Tennessee, a lot of the land was forested, but significant amounts were originally in grassy or shrub and grass condition because of fire, because of grazing by animals, because of shallow soils, various reasons. And a lot of this has been taken over by development. And so the power line cuts, when they're maintained manually, provide an open area for the plants that originally occurred in those open areas to grow. And so we're going to see a number of those today. There's some really special ones that occur in power lines in places. And so it can be a great area for conservation. A recent trend has been going to use herbicides to keep out the woody plants from growing up into the power lines, and that is a very destructive kind of approach, and professional botanists would argue against it in most situations because the use of manual removal keeps the vegetation low, keeps the power lines functioning, and provides a great place for plants. Let's look at a special plant that's up here. Here's a nice attractive plant. It looks nice, and also when we crush up the leaves it smells nice. Unfortunately you can't get that from video. You should recognize the family of this plant. Notice the bilabiate corollas, the opposite leaves, which are decussate. If you go down the stem, they turn at right angles in the attachment one to the next. And then you'll see that peeking out the top here is this bifid style. There are stamens that are attached to the corolla, and the ovary is deeply four-lobed. This is Monarda fistulosa. Monarda fistulosa has a lot of common names. The one common name I'll use for right now is bee balm. Another common name is horse mint. And I think it gets the name horse mint because the minty smell is really pronounced, like a horse would even appreciate how the odor smells. Nice odor to these leaves. So Lamiaceae, Monarda fistulosa, bee balm. This roadside area in the parking area at Haw Ridge Park is a great place to look for plants because it's an open area and there's a lot of things blooming out here. And here is a very striking plant, very pretty. And this plant has opposite leaves, it has square stems, it has actinomorphic flowers though, and so you start thinking maybe Lamiaceae, but when we take the flower apart, what we're going to see is that the ovary is not deeply lobed. Instead, the ovary is only slightly too lobed and the style comes off the top. So this is a related family called the Acanthaceae, and this is a plant known by the common name of wild petunia, and scientifically it's Ruellia caroliniensis. And we can then take one of these flowers and detach it here and take a closer look. You'll see it's got 5 sepals that are fused together, 5 petals in a united corolla. If we open up the corolla, what we will see are the 2 pairs of stamens, so 4 stamens, didynomous, a single style, and that style comes down here to the base, and I'm going to take the corolla off here, and you can see here's the corolla, a single piece, and what's left behind is the style coming out of the superior ovary. I'm going to take the sepals apart here, And we can see the kind of greenish ovary there at the base. And my x-ray vision tells me it's two-carpellate. So this is not a major family that we'll learn, but this is a common plant that we find in open areas in East Tennessee in this time of year. Ruellia caroliniensis, which is wild petunia. Walking up into this roadside, we will see some old friends here. This is our plant near and dear to the volunteer heart, the oxeye daisy. Smaller cousin, the daisy fleabane. The same head appearance, but on a much smaller scale. The ray flowers, little tiny things. Both of them Asteraceae. Walking up a little bit on the slope, we find this plant, which is another commonly encountered one in fields, roadsides in East Tennessee. This is Prunella vulgaris, self-heal in the Lamiaceae. Now it's time for a new plant. And let's go ahead and walk a little bit further up in here. And we get this plant. Notice the lacy leaves, alternate kind of arrangement. And then when we look up here, we look at these things that look like little white flowers. But our educated eyes now recognize there's two types of flowers here. There are ray flowers, which are white, and there are disc flowers, which come off in the center of this. So this is Asteraceae. This is one you want to look at carefully, because a lot of people look at this and will say Apiaceae just because it's a flat-topped inflorescence. But when we look at it from the bottom, what we can see is it's not a compound umbel. It's actually a panicle with the branches coming off at different levels. And this plant is an ancient healing plant, Asteraceae. The genus name is Achillea, or Achillea, named for the famous Greek hero Achilles. And the epithet is millefolium, which means millions of or thousands of leaves. So you can see that the leaflets are just little tiny dissected things. So Achillea millefolium, and the common name is yarrow. Another fairly commonly encountered open field plant in East Tennessee in the early summer. Here's another commonly encountered late spring, early summer Asteraceae. Notice the yellow ray flowers and yellow disc flowers. This is Pachyra anonyma, and Pachyra goes by the name ragwort, and it's called ragwort because as these go into fruit, the pappus of bristles makes it look kind of irregular and like a rag kind of thing. And that's what helps to disperse the seeds, is that little parachute that's formed from the pappus. So Pachyra anonyma, common name is ragwort. You should recognize this plant. It was the very first one we keyed out. It was on the first identification quiz. This is our little buttercup, Ranunculus sardis, in the Ranunculaceae. Here's a plant that's a little bit inconspicuous, but it's so common you'll see it a lot of different places. And it has a curious arrangement of what would expect to be the inflorescence. And sometimes it will produce normal flowers. Sometimes, as here, it produces little bulblets. And they start making new plants, and sometimes there's a mixture. This is wild garlic, which is Allium vineale. And this is in a family that's variously referred different places. We'll call it the Alliaceae for right now. And another way you can be sure of the identity is if you take this and you grind it up with your fingers and you smell it, unmistakable garlic odor. Here's our plant of wild garlic. We've removed it, no big loss because there'll be plenty more where it came from. It's not a native species. And you'll see at the base, as is typical of a number of monocots, it produces a bulb. We'll talk about bulbs probably later in the class, but this is the underground stem that has lots of fleshy leaves all folded around it. Again, this is a monocot. There are no flowers on this particular stem, although other plants of this will produce flowers. Allium vineale wild garlic. You might wonder about putting this in your cooking pot. You can Google it and see what people have to say, but the general consensus is the flavor is a little bit strong for ordinary usage. There are other ways to get onions and garlics into your food than this one. Here are a couple more plants you'll recognize, and what you're going to find is that many of the common plants you encounter, you're going to know these days. So here's our friend the white clover. Hopefully you've made your iNaturalist post on that one. And just a few inches away, poking out of the vegetation, is poison ivy. Notice the trifoliolate leaf with the continuation of the rachis so that it is pinnately trifoliolate. Poison ivy, a plant we don't want to come in contact with. This open power line cut habitat is a perfect habitat for this plant, which you've already seen. This is our Yucca filamentosa in the Agaveaceae. The left stem nice and straight, not sure what happened to that right stem, but it got a little bit of a curve in it. And then you'll notice that basal rosette of leaves, very characteristic. The leaf tip's quite pointy, and you could visualize taking and detaching one of those. It comes off with a little bit of tissue, and you could sew up your rip on your shirt. So that's why it's called Adam's needle. Driving in, we noticed this cluster of plants along the roadside, and this pretty clearly belongs to a family you'll recognize. Notice the alternate compound leaves, particularly the inflorescences that are compound umbels with little tiny white flowers on them. And this is a notable plant called Conium maculatum. Common name is poison hemlock. This is the plant that gave the poison that was used to kill Socrates. This plant has been an invasive that has been spreading for a number of years. When I drive up through Kentucky, it's all along the interstates there. And now I'm seeing it in increasing numbers along our own interstates. There are patches here and there, and also some along some of the secondary roads. A plant to know if you're a wild food enthusiast because of its deadly poisonous nature. Growing with the poison hemlock, we find this other plant. This is a member of Asteraceae. This is a thistle, and there's a point in your key that says, is the plant a thistle or not? So let's talk about what makes a plant a thistle. First of all the flowers are disc flowers. They're all the same size and shape. You can see the involucre of bracts surrounding this, and then as we go down the stems and the leaves, it is abundantly coated with prickles. And this is really an industrial strength thistle. This is an invasive one. We have some natives that are pretty nice ones. You almost need gloves to handle this particular plant. So as I take a piece of this for imaging, I'm going to be careful not to get myself damaged by the numerous thistles on this plant. Carduus nutans, common name of musk thistle. Now we're going to transition from being in the open power line cut to being in a wooded habitat. All woods in East Tennessee are relatively recent because the entire area was cut over. This particular woods has some somewhat older trees in it, but it doesn't necessarily have the trees that were here before Western Europeans got here. For instance, the chestnut would have been about 15% or more of the trees in this area. Another change that's happening right now is that the emerald ash borer is wiping out the ashes in here, and we may see some evidence as we walk through here. What we're going to do is take a look and contrast the lack of beautiful flowers in the dark shaded areas, and then we'll go look at a couple things that may be blooming in this woods. We can see in these woods what's left over from the beautiful spring flora. East Tennessee has just a wonderful display of flowering plants in the early spring, and a lot of these will bloom and then produce their fruits and go dormant after the canopy closes in. This is one that's related to the wild gingers. This is Asarum, Hexastylus erifolia, and the common name is little brown jugs. And if you look at the very base of the plant, the flowers are produced here, and the flower has a calyx which has a couple three teeth at the end, and inside are the stamens and the pistils, and it just looks like a little jug here, which is how it gets its name, little brown jugs. The seeds of this plant will have a little food body attached to them. They're right down here on ground level, and they're picked up by ants and dispersed by ants. So a beautiful kind of symbiosis between the ants and the plant. Here's another characteristic spring flowering herb. Just in the later stages, it's getting ready to produce its fruit. This is called Trillium, and this happens to be Trillium luteum or yellow trillium. Trillium has everything in threes: 3 leaves, 3 sepals, 3 petals that are now withered up. It will have 6 stamens, or 2 times 3, and then a 3-carpellate ovary in the middle of the flower. And at this time of year, the ovary may be expanding to produce a fruit. This one looks like it wasn't too happy though, and may not have gotten pollinated. So Trillium luteum, common name is Trillium, or there's lots of other local common names such as toadshade. It's in the family Melanthiaceae. Striking plant that does bloom in the early summer woods even after it's gotten a little bit dark. This is a family you should recognize. We have here on the stem alternate compound leaves, but no stipules. And then the flowers occur in these beautiful racemes, and the flowers, when they open, will have 4 or 5 separate sepals that are petal-like. They don't have any petals. They'll have numerous stamens, and they'll have simple pistils. So you should recognize the family as Ranunculaceae, and the scientific name of this is Simicifiga racemosa, and it has a variety of common names, one of which is bugbane. So Simicifiga racemosa, black cohosh, or bugbane. Here's another early summer blooming plant that we find on the forest floor. Notice these early summer blooming plants, after the canopy fills in, will have white corollas, because white is the most easily discerned color other than black in the forest. And this is the spotted wintergreen. Chimaphila is the genus, and it is in the Ericaceae, the heath family. So Chimaphila maculata, spotted wintergreen. Here's another characteristic spring blooming plant that's still quite visible in the early summer. Look at these large leaves, which are mostly basal, but there are some that are colline as well. The leaves give this plant its common name of hound's tongue. And then the flowers are in these curious arrangements that curl up. And we will see that the ovary, which is what's left here, is deeply four-lobed, but most of these actually only have 1 or 2 or 3 of the lobes that are going into fruit. And the fruits are one-seeded fruits, and they have this kind of spiny covering on them. They'll attach to your clothing, they'll attach to the passing possum or skunk, and get carried along the trail and dispersed. This is in the family Boraginaceae. This is this other family besides the mint family that has these four-lobed ovaries, and the common name for this again is hound's tongue or wild comfrey, and the scientific name is Cynoglossum virginianum. Now you'll notice a lot of the plants that we encounter have names that have Virginia or Maryland or Carolina in them. Not too many with Tennessee, and that's because the colonies, when Linnaeus was naming plants, extended indefinitely from the coast to the west. So Maryland, Carolina, and Virginia claimed all the territory out to the Mississippi, and plant collectors would not always know whose territory they were in, so they'd put the name of whatever colony they came from. And that's why we have a lot of things like this: Virginiensis, Marylandica, Carolinensis. Here's some local color out here. This is a little rat snake out hunting and just kind of enjoying a beautiful early summer day in East Tennessee. Please remember that it is illegal to kill snakes in Tennessee, and there are no snakes that occur in Tennessee that will actively go after you. If you try to pick them up, they may try to defend themselves. You can see we're within a few inches of this guy, totally relaxed, not a worry in the world. Here's a little member of the mint family, the Lamiaceae. Notice the purple bilabiate corollas, the opposite leaves and square stems, but what's really notable about this one is the top of the calyx. This is a key step that students have trouble with because they've never seen it. So you're going to get a chance to see it. It has a little protuberance at the top of the calyx, and it gets more pronounced as this goes into fruit. And it looks like a little skull there, and gives this plant its common name of skullcap. And the genus is Scutellaria, and this is Scutellaria. I'm not sure of the species of this one, but if you'll look at the top of the calyx here, we may impose an image for you to help you see this. It's got that little protuberance. That's what it means at that particular key step of whether the calyx has that or not. So Scutellaria skullcap in the Lamiaceae. Here's our friend, the prairie rose, being visited by some potential pollinators. Rosaceae with the 5 petals, the numerous stamens, and then if you look under that one fly in the middle, you'll see that protruding column of green styles, which is a key feature that distinguishes this from some of the other species of rose that occur in our area. Prairie rose, Rosa sativa.